Welcome to another episode of Tibalt's Apprentice, Luck of the Draw. Filmed on location at the Game Hub in Manhattan Beach, California, 1809 Manhattan Beach Boulevard. The only thing better than having a game store to go to is having a comic book store right next door. Welcome to Tibalt's Apprentice, Luck of the Draw. Today's episode, well, it started with a question. It started with a question about this elf being better than this elf. When I initially posted this, the immediate response that I got was, well, I want to say all the trolls came out, but the fact is, I worded the question poorly. I said, which one's better? And on the surface, it's pretty obvious, right? But at least one person in the comments quickly understood what I was asking. When I said, which one is better for my commander deck, or which one would be better for a more competitive commander deck, he immediately grasped the concept that, what's your mana base look like? While this is a mono green deck, talked about it before on the channel, it still has 1/3 of the land that is not green. So that means suddenly this is a little bit more difficult to cast. Not hard in a green deck, and not hard considering the commander, Freyaliae, Llanowar's Fury, makes mana dorks that produce green. But just to make this a little bit more competitive, this is actually what I went with instead. The Elder, same CMC, but not quite the same CMC. That additional 2 green that this cost means that this can come out just a little bit earlier or under a larger variety of circumstances. I may not get as many mana when I tap it, but this deck has to have an explosive start. So let's actually take a look at the commander first. So you can see that she makes mana dorks, one creatures that can produce mana. She also destroys enchantments and artifacts. Destroys enchantments. So let that sink in for a minute, because, well, obviously it's green, so it's going to do that, but that's one of the most difficult things that I've found in Commander to get rid of. I think everybody's found that same thing. And the fact that you can get cards to gas up your hand again, that's just gravy. And, well, quite frankly, I've never done that in any of the games that I've actually played. So, starting a few videos back, I decided to lean more heavily into the strategies of the commanders played more than just the cards. Well, I'm including the cards along the way too, but I think there should be a more heavy focus on the line of play that you take. Let's take a look at this deck that I've built. And I say I've built it more from the standpoint of the cards that I've added to it. While it initially was a pre-con that I purchased from behind the counter, I think I've told this story before, 2014 maybe, it was the only commander that was still on the shelf that I could get. But this deck has done so much to allow me to win and move forward that I kind of think I need to look at the build that I've got and the one that I run. To make that explosive start that we need to begin the game, we have a few artifacts. Well, of course, there's Sol Ring. We don't need to talk about that. And actually, Moss Diamond, Moss Emerald, well, duh, it's a green deck, right? Some of the other cards, though, that, well, they're going to be obvious too, but the newest addition would be the Nyx Lotus. Again, since it's mono green, that devotion factor is going to be way up there. A couple other cards, though, that I've added by digging through my older things are Earthcraft. tap an untapped creature you control, untap a basic land. No summoning sickness, no other restriction than the fact that it just has to be an untapped creature. Since there's so many things that put creatures on the board as tokens, that gives me a lot of ability to untap the basic lands. I mentioned earlier in the video that a full third of this was maybe not forest, but that means there's over 20 cards in here that are forest, and of course that's a basic land, so there you go. Gaia's Touch is another one that I've added here from the Dark. You may put an additional land into play during each of your turns, but that land must be a basic forest. Well, with over 2/3 of them, or about 2/3 of them being forest, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to have those. Just in case though, I can sacrifice this to get back the 2 mana that I spent to put that down. So late in the game, with a potentially game-changing play, it might be handy to be able to do that. Now those were the enchantments and those were the artifacts that, well, were kind of like, why not? Same goes for these sorceries, though of course there's a burgeoning in here, which means whenever an opponent plays a land I may play a land, put a land from my hand onto the battlefield. Song of Freyaliae, to ensure that on the next turn, all of my mana dorks become mana dorks even if they aren't mana dorks. And then Early Harvest, a card that I want to say is generally overlooked. Depending on the type of deck you play, if you have a significant ratio of basic lands that's higher than your utility lands or your off-color lands, Early Harvest is just awesome, provided you've got that mana. I know we talked a little bit at the very beginning of this, how those mana symbols can be restrictive. This takes 2 green and a colorless, but still, if you've got a place to put that in your deck and you have plenty of basic land, good way to go. Mrs. Triumph and Explosive Vegetation are all about getting that explosive start to the game. But then what? So beyond the mana dorks that we talked about, those 1/1s that provide 1 green, such as your Llanowar Elves or your Elvis Mystic, we've added the Fin-Horned Elf. 1 green, 2 colorless to tap for 2 mana. But there's also things like the Priest of Titania in here. And I can add green for each elf on the battlefield. Again, who cares about summoning sickness or anything else? As long as I have something that has the keyword elf attached to it, I've got plenty of mana. Krosan Restore isn't an elf, it's a druid. But for 1/2, it has the great ability of untapping a target land. The great ability? The fair ability, the middling ability. Unless, of course, you have Threshold. Threshold means you get to untap 3 target lands. Doesn't say basic, 3 target lands. This ability can only be played if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Well, depending how deep you are in the game, that's usually not too hard to achieve. Elvish Archdruid. Not only is it a mana dork of sorts, well, I can't really call it a dork if it's giving you green mana for each elf you control, but it also is a lord, which means you can give all of your other elves +1/+1. We also end out with Marylin the Nurturer. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield you control, you get to put a +1/+1 on her, and then tap her to add mana equal to her power. Value, 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 value. There's about 5 other elf lords in this deck, so needless to say, that's very advantageous. But now we get into where this deck really shines. So I'm going to have to go to my notes here for this one. This is, of course, where the keywords factor in. Keywords, well, this deck has a few. Let me list them if I may. Echo, Death Touch, Trample. Dash, Vigilance, Haste, Reach. Landfall, Champion, Flash, Scry. Infect, Cycling, Devotion, Regeneration, and Multi-Kicker. That's a lot of keywords. That's a lot of keywords to keep track of. So what I'd like to ask you in the comments below, how do you keep track of triggers? When you have that many, well, most decks I don't think have that many. Maybe they do. I should maybe add that up. But when you find yourself overwhelmed with triggers, what mnemonic device, what do you have that allows you to keep track of those triggers? I know I'm going to say everybody's guilty of missing triggers more than once, and probably more than once a turn, not only more than once a game, certainly more than once a turn even. What do you do to keep track of all those triggers? Seriously, I need to know. I need some suggestions. The deck list will appear below, but I've just got 3 more cards that I want to talk about before I end this. Those 3 are Lull. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. It's a little bit more expensive than a Fog maybe, but 1 green, 1 colorless. That's a handy addition to the deck. Weatherseed Elf. For 1 green, you get a 1/1 creature. Target creature gains Forest Walk until end of turn. A nice simple surprise that I'm hoping to slip by undetected. Repopulate's another one that I've never really heard anybody else talk about. For 1 green, 1 colorless, shuffle all creatures from target player's graveyard into that player's library. And again, we have cycling. It just seems like a handy way to recover from board wipes, which I won't say I'm subject to, but I do think my enemies like to get those off on me as soon as they can, especially with this deck. At any rate, as I bring this to a close, I'd like to ask you again, what do you do to keep track of your triggers? Again, any suggestions are going to be helpful. I hope you subscribe to Tibalt's Apprentice down below there. Maybe you want to hit the notification bell, maybe you don't. Monday through Friday, well, in fact, every day, I stream and often I put up my arena play. So if you're not into that, at least subscribe, come back and see what we have each Monday for you with regards to EDH or Commander. We have some guests, and we also have some other exciting shows that I have in the works here. So in the meantime, thanks for taking the time to watch this, and hit that subscribe button.